Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this panel called Learning from Superyacht Owners and Business Leaders. I'm Sacha Williams. I'm the Director of Child Marketing for Camper Nicholsons. And today we have with us Charles Darby, the Director of Development for Christophe Harbour in St. Kitts, and also representing the Darby family, owner of the very well-known Perini Navi Andromeda Ladea. And then next to Charles we have Onno Ebbens, founder and partner of Coolminds Group, Zoom International, and of course founding member of ACREW, the reasons we're all here today. And then we have Superyacht Captain Daniel Hedges, now representing Monaco. And of course, Ian, Managing Director of Superyacht Supplies. There we are. So, we're here today to talk about the innovation that we can bring to the superyachting industry from looking to the corporate world. Also, experience that people like Ian, who have, can I say, 40 years experience.
25.
Years experience. Can bring to our ever-growing industry. So perhaps Ian, I'll pass on to you first to bring us into what you bring into superyachting.
Okay. Morning, everyone. My background is in the food industry. I was born into the food industry, actually international meat industry. I developed that company, went on into other sectors, into the ambient world, and over a period of 25 years, we built a very large multi-million pound business with varying disciplines in the sector, supplying most sectors, both nationally and internationally. We had a supermarket group supplying every major supermarket in the UK and also in Europe. We were exporting there. We also had another division looking after the hotel and catering sector, major hotel groups, both individual and national groups. And we also supplied into the wholesale cash and carry market in the UK and here, places like Metro, which obviously is really well known to most of the captains and people based here on the Riviera. We built that business up over a period of time, had a number of brands. We were both importing and exporting on a multi-million pound basis, and obviously had considerable experience within the food sector and also in international logistics. I sold the company in 2000 to a very large multi-billion pound group who wanted to enter and gain from the logistical side of our business, and they took that company on, and like many situations of owner-managers, I left to pursue other interests. Not knowing what those interests were going to be, I ended up in the yacht world simply because somebody asked me to do something for in the yachting side, and I liked what I saw about yachting and the experience that I had. I thought I could bring quite a lot of benefit to that from the provisioning side, and we started Superyacht Supplies 12 years ago. I'm based in the UK, but we have an operation here in France, also in the Caribbean, in Croatia and in Montenegro, and we deliver on a global basis, utilising all the commercial experience and food and drink knowledge that we had, and we've applied that to the yachting sector along with the international logistics side, which was a natural part of our business and obviously perfectly suited to the industry. When we started 12 years ago, I think you'll all agree that the market has moved on considerably in that period of time. There were very large yachts, or what were considered to be very large yachts 12 years ago, probably were not very large yachts by comparison to today. So in actual fact, what we were offering at the time, the market has actually grown into the offering that we have, and that's to be able to provide continuity in the marketplace. But there are a lot of other things that we see in the yachting market that simply wouldn't have been acceptable in the commercial world, and I remain somewhat surprised and we've been discussing that in our own fields before we joined the panel, that probably the yachting market would benefit from.
Yes, you mentioned, Ian, earlier one of the weaknesses that you perceive to be is the lack of due diligence.
Well, I don't necessarily see it as a due diligence as a weakness as such, but I am somewhat surprised that in my previous business we certainly couldn't have done business with all the leading companies and even small restaurants, even individual restaurants, without an audit taking place for the supply of fresh food and other products. They needed to know for their insurance purposes that we were complying in every way, because they also had to comply, and the whole supply chain had to comply, still does. If you take a very major group like Sodexo, who a French company as it happens, but a huge catering operation, their compliance document is a horrific 260 odd pages long. I'm not suggesting for one moment that we ever have anything like that within the yachting market, but there is a difference between having a document of that nature and none at all. I have never been asked, from the day we started supplying in the yachting market, to provide any audit trail or due diligence of the supply chain that we have, or traceability. With the high net worth individuals that not only own their guests and your charter guests, I'm quite surprised that the insurance situation doesn't demand that you have cover that does that, and how therefore are you protected. And that's just one part of sort of the one difference maybe between the commercial market and...
I think a large part of our industry is based on trust rather than the qualification side of things. I think Onno had some...
Yeah, can I just say on that, I completely agree, and I'm not suggesting that we over-regulate. I mean, regulations are the pain of all of us in this room in every respect of what we do professionally. But I suspect that talking to an insurance company to say, we do it on trust. I trusted that my driver was a good driver, therefore I didn't insure him. Somehow, I don't think would go down very well.
No, I think, Onno, we were talking about how much emphasis we put on the people as opposed to qualifications a lot of the time in yachting. And I think you were saying, well, an interesting question for the floor would be, which is more important, given that we're very much a people industry?
Yeah, and we had a lot of discussions about it the last couple of days. Basically, yesterday afternoon we had one, and what is more important on a superyacht, qualification or group dynamics? It's an interesting question, and as we are a panel, I'm not going to tell you what I feel about it. I'm going to ask you to comment on it so that but I can tell you a long story about what I do, but I'm not going to. But it is an interesting question. What are your feelings about that? Qualifications or group dynamics?
Is anyone here a yacht captain? Oh, yes. Okay, so maybe you have... KP. Hello.
Well, I think the industry has grown to require qualifications, and that's important. But I think that the team effort and the group effort is to me is more important to get the job done, because no one person can complete the task. So, and I come from a sort of, I'm sort of maybe in the 40-year range of being around boats in that part of the industry. So I've seen it grown a lot, which is in that growth. It's been interesting to watch how the industry's changed, but I personally rely on people that have got experience and can pull it together and work together more so than the other way around.
But then the second question is, I come from a corporate background, and which also I've been discussing this earlier. You have to set an example to get group dynamics, and a captain is basically trained to drive a boat. And he's not trained to manage a company. You're the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company without a back office.
No, and you're right, and that's where I've most probably fallen down, because as the boats have grown, the crew members have multiplied, and all of a sudden you are dealing with more of a corporate situation. So I for one most probably have lost out a little in that path and could have been educated better.
What kind of support is there for you then
Very little. I mean, really. I had to interact with corporate, and that you learn from that. But it's so different because our life on the boat is so different to life in a corporate office. That's a challenge, getting that message across. So.
I think. Sorry, stay here.
Karen Passman, Impact Crew, and it is with the recognition that the industry hasn't traditionally had a background with some support in terms of the leadership and team development. So having worked in the industry back in 2001, I recognised that because that was my field. So back in 2007, formed Impact Crew, as you know, to specifically fulfil that gap between the leadership that you now need to provide with your crew and the significant numbers you're now dealing with, and how we do create and bond those teams.
I think perhaps Alison as the crew coach.
Yes.
You might have some comments to make on the group dynamic and how it can be improved.
Alison Rental, the crew coach, and working in partnership with campers, providing leadership training and support to the captains of their fleets. And this is really a key serious issue that we're trying to address here, is giving captains the kind of support in how to actually manage their teams, the team dynamics, the crew dynamics of all the different types of personalities that you have on board. What can we borrow from the corporate culture of psychometric testing and things like that to actually not just sort of let a team of people fall together on instinct, but to actually creatively put a team of people together that we know are going to be able to work together, that are going to complement each other's skill sets, and form in a way a dream team that has every different aspect. Because we all know that everybody can't be good at everything, but if we put together a team of people who are all individually great at all the different things that we need, then we're going to have a super team and a strong team. So very passionate about what we're talking about here. I think there's a lot to take from the corporate world that is only just now beginning to make its way into yachting. It's about time. But people like Karen, myself, there's a few other coaches as well working in the industry trying to bring this to the industry. I think we're going to get there. So it's exciting.
Thank you. Any members of our panel have any thoughts on, perhaps Daniel's Superyacht captain, you have some comments or success stories on how to build the right team dynamic on board? Or
well, good morning. I think there's a huge resistance within the yachting. We talk about all this legislation coming in, and people are passing down, telling us what we now need to do and be a part of in that game. And because of people are inherently, we shy away from something we don't understand, we're not grasping onto it, we're not grabbing, we're not going out and learning what we can from the corporate world and actually taking that, which is why people are now telling us what we need to do. So I think, having come from the yacht background and now going into the corporate world, I thought there was more what I could bring to the corporate world, whereas I think there's a lot more, looking on it now, I think there's a lot more that we could take from the corporate world and bring back into yachting.
Well, perhaps, Charles, you have some comments to make as both coming from a yacht owner's background, but also the corporate. Oh. We're not repelling each other, sorry. Perhaps, just to talk about the dynamics that were involved in building up Christophe Harbour and establishing the team there.
Yeah, sure. My background is in the corporate world, but have had the fortune that my father owns a super yacht, so I've been able to see that side of the industry, and we are currently completing our first phase of our marina in Christophe Harbour, which is 24 berths from 150 to 220 feet in length, and so that's going to bring a whole new dynamic of people that we have to bring on board to train, etc. And from my experience, it's all about the top, and you have to have a very good manager, leader in place. Certainly below them, you should hire whoever, whatever technical side of the business that you're looking for. But you also can hire people that are real go-getters, and you can teach them how to do things because they are so willing to learn, and they understand the dynamic of, they have the cheery personality. They understand, how to work well with others. They really understand that the job description is everything under the sun. And I think that's the most important thing, that, that when we have people that come in, they all want to know from a corporate standpoint and to work down at Christophe Harbour is what is my job description, what is my job title, and it's everything. You might be, even if you're in the office all the time, you might be called upon to do stuff outside of the office, and you have to be very flexible. So that flexibility is something that I think that an underlying value that you want with whoever you're hiring.
Flexibility, also perhaps because, I think, Onno, you mentioned our industry is quite unique in its diversity, different cultures, different walks of life, and I think we're probably quite alone in having to deal with people from all walks of life, whereas in a normal corporate environment you'd probably be a little more limited. How do you think there are any particular secrets that you can let us into to help succeed?
Well, I own some Dutch companies which only involve Dutch people, basically. And I own some international companies. And there is a major difference, because if you want to mingle cultures, and now we're not only talking about the culture mingle within the yacht, but also the type of guests, because in the end it's all about guest experience. And if you got, and it's a difference. If you got a boat with an owner, or if you're on a charter boat where you can get an American gentleman or family on board and a Russian the next week, you get a completely different kind of, there's something different which is expected from you. And I agree completely with Charles that it goes top down. So in the end, the captain and the head of departments need to know everything. Basically, I don't know, because I'm not a captain, so maybe Daniel can answer that. If you would get like a Russian client on board, what would you tell your team about them? How to handle that? Do you know?
Talk about it. Yeah, here you go.
Thanks, Onno. No, I think you have to be very adaptable, obviously, in this game, and you have to make it. You're constantly changing your opinion on the guests and adapting with them. But from the moment they walk on board, you're trying to work them out and what it is that they want. Yeah. Every charter guest is different, and even that charter guest will change throughout the day and throughout the course of the trip. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, and that is where yachting is a fantastic forum, I think, for the personal development, because you are exposed to all of those situations. Yeah. And if you can survive in yachting among all these different cultures, I think you can go into, that translates to any other industry. At the end of the day, if you break all these industries down, it's all about people. Mm-hmm. And if you can manage people, and I think yachting is a fantastic starting point for that, you can survive in anything else that you do.
Because that's going on to what we were discussing earlier about the transferable skills, looking for a career post-yachting for a lot of crew. And of course you've taken that step from becoming a Superyacht captain, well, still are a Superyacht captain, but in your work with Monaco also. Charles.
Sorry, I was just going to highlight that fact that Daniel was talking about, being on a super yacht and being a captain and making the transition into the corporate world. And Aeneas Hollis, who was captain on Andromeda for my father, is now working with us down in Christophe Harbour and is head of yachting, involved in the sales of these marina berths, and has been bringing, talking to the captains and crews to bring them over. And one of the main reasons was, he didn't have, his background was a captain, but he understands that all of those dynamics, how to be adaptable, how to be flexible, and how to get along and talk to people and anticipate people's problems, issues, questions, etc. And that is just vitally important. All of the things that he may lack from opening a marina, so to speak, we can plug those gaps, but the other intangibles or actually tangible things that he does is very, very invaluable.
I would completely agree with that. I would say that in the commercial world that most managers have a much more narrow management role than a captain. In fact, I would think that it would unless it was an owner, hands-on, single store type of business somebody was doing everything. But what is expected of a captain is far, far, far greater than would ever happen in the commercial world in most instances. And the larger the business gets, probably the more specialised they actually get. And the converse for a captain, because the larger the vessel gets, the more responsibility he has across a wider spectrum of tasks on board. So there would be certainly a very big difference there. I'm not saying that captains are not prepared for that, because I think what has been said, actually, they're very, very good and can adapt to the commercial world.
And getting back to your question and different cultures within there, what we do a lot in the corporate world is that you build small teams. Like, the trick is to build small teams. And even within a superyacht, I mean, if you're on a yacht on a 30 meter with 6 crew, it's going to be different. But there are a lot of yachts already, and they're growing bigger, and they're having 20, 30 crew on board. And I think the biggest thing to learn, the biggest tip I would give to a captain, is to divide it up in 5-person teams, because you can manage 5-person teams as a captain. You cannot manage 30 people.
That's an excellent tip.
And it works.
Yeah.
It actually works, because what you do, you make a 5-person team, make someone team leader, head of the department, whatever you want to call it, and that's, so basically you're still, if you're 30 people on board, you are managing 6 only, not 30. Because you can't take, I see a lot of tech captains take all the responsibility to do them. I know he is as well pretty good, and I think he was an excellent captain, and he's doing brilliant in St. Kitts. As I know, because I know him, we Skype sometimes, I'm not really sure I'm allowed to tell what the boss around. And he said, how am I going to handle this? I'm a captain. And then I asked him to do the sales, and he was brilliant at it, but even a captain is insecure once in a while. And where is he going to, he's on somewhere in the ocean, where is he going to get his help? And all the coaches are going to say, hey, here. But I went around the ocean, right? So that's the thing as well. So that's so doing those, build small teams in every business anyway. Build small teams. That's the trick.
Yeah, so I just wanted to go back to what you were talking about earlier, just a moment ago, about who can captains talk to, and you were like, all the coaches are going to go to me. But that's one of the things that I think we can really learn from the corporate world, is that there's no shame in learning about people management, learning about leadership, and enhancing your skills in that regard. We still, in the yachting industry, there's still a bit of a stigma about this, and all the coaches are nodding, because we do come up against this, and we're united together trying to help break down those barriers and help captains to recognise that actually this is a really important part of professional development and personal development. And in the corporate world, we wouldn't expect somebody to rise up into a position of managing teams of people and have no leadership training. That would just be mad. So why do we think that it's unnecessary in yachting, or why do people think that, get defensive about feeling like, we're trying to push leadership training on them? There's so much to be gained, and when people, because really yachting is all about relationships, as we're saying. It's all comes down to how well you can manage your teams, how well you can get along with people, how well you can get along with the guests. So the soft skills, the people skills, the leadership skills are essential.
I completely agree, and again, in the commercial world, the senior guys in a buying role, for example, who are buying thousands and thousands of products in a Tesco in the UK or a Carrefour, turn to experts outside, because they cannot possibly have knowledge of everything, and they have no shame in doing that. And I think sometimes everybody wants to be their own expert and are not prepared to turn to the outside world. Maybe that's because over the years there have not been enough experts out there in the various fields that they could trust. In the commercial world, we did business in a slightly different way because obviously our clients were making actual money. They had to make profit. If I sold them something for 10 euros, they were going to sell it for as many more euros than 10 as they possibly could. That's not the case in yachting in quite the same way, although we're all working to budgets in the yachting world as much as you are in the commercial world. But I think that's one of the big differences, that they would have no problem whatsoever to turn to various experts. Sadly, and I hope I'm not offending anybody in the room, as we all have to do with lawyers and accountants, and because we accept that they have a level of expertise that we can't handle, and I think it's the same in other disciplines as well.
I think we talk about captains as well, and what is a yacht captain? If you ask somebody in the outside world, a yacht captain is somebody who drives the boat, whereas that is the smallest part of the job. The captain, first and foremost, he's there to develop that culture. He is responsible for the tone of how that vessel works, both with the crew on board and that relationship with the owner. And I think it's very difficult as a captain to look outside. One, either through communications or logistics wise, that it's difficult to find that help off the boat. And the other thing is, you can't show, as a captain, you can't show weakness to, you've got junior crew who are looking at you where you have to be right. And you can't, he has to know, he's the captain, he knows. So I think part of the stigma of being a captain is you can't show that fallibility, if you will.
They're real men. No, but it's true, but you can't. Because we are forgetting one big difference between the corporate world. If I make a mistake as a CEO, it will cost me a fortune. If he makes a mistake, the boat will sink. I mean, for safety first. And for safety first, you have to make decisions as a captain. So I think that's something we have to take into account as well, right? To do that. I wanted to get back to Ian, about trust in companies. I own a service agent as well, right? And people use us and they're happy with us. And no one, and we ask EPAs like 40, 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, whatever necessary. But no captain has ever asked my solvability. That's impossible in the corporate world. You know what solvability is, right? Yeah? That means if I'm good for my money, if you're not putting it down the drain somewhere, if I'm able to pay my suppliers, which I am hiring suppliers in your name. If I'm not paying them, they will come after you or come to you as a management company. They will go somewhere. No one does that in the superyacht industry. Unknown of in the corporate world. Unknown. Would you hire me for that solvability?
Do you think then perhaps there is a lack of experts that people in yachting can turn to, whether you're a captain or an owner? Perhaps there's, because we have information on such a lockdown in this industry, or as you're saying, you can't seem to be infallible. Perhaps there's not the same inclination as there is in the corporate world to look to the experts, and hence they're not there. Sorry, Ian.
I think the problem there is that calling yourself an expert doesn't make you one. And that is the problem, because as a captain, who do you trust? But that's something that is built with time. But going back to what I opened with on traceability, audit trails, is a little bit the same regarding even the same for us. How does somebody know that we're actually going to be able to deliver financially what we've been asked to do? Sadly, the way we work, most of our clients do not pay us up in advance. It's actually difficult to do that. That is the way that in provisioning is, for us, is the way. We work on a more commercial way, the same we would in a commercial market. But how do they know that we're going to do that from Salt? But what is an expert? And I'm not quite sure in this industry what is. There are a lot of them about.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wondered if you, who are you looking to, you must have a whole host of experts in order to set up a marina in a place where there was previously very little in the way of infrastructure.
Yes, and excuse me, the on the ground team that you put in place is very, very critical. I think in just knowing a limited, I've never hired a captain or a crew, or just been around boats and super yachts for a long time. Captains don't go from shore to captain just like that. I mean, they gain knowledge from previous captains they've worked for and from just experience, and that is no different from me working my way up the ranks in the corporate world. As far as the infrastructure and putting the team in place, I mean, you always want the most qualified person there, and so I think that whereas St. Kitts as a nation has no yachting experience, so they are very willing and able and have a thirst for learning, but you have to bring in the right team to get them there, the right training, etc. So that is one huge hurdle that we will and are facing right now, is bringing in the right team so that the native Kittitians are armed with the knowledge and the power to go off and pull the level of service that these super yachts require, because we all know that the top is the level of service is second to none. No hotel, it's unbelievable, the super yacht industry and the level of service. So it certainly is a challenge for us, certainly something we're dealing with right now, and it'll be ongoing for quite a long time, I'm sure. But getting the right team in place and having the right tools for them will be critical over the next few months, especially.
Okay. Does anybody have any frustrations or with the industry in its current state that maybe our panel here could provide some insight from their experience in the corporate world? No, everyone's really happy.
Sorry. I think it's difficult as well in that we talk about there's not that help around, but then you've developed something like ACREW have now with the seminars, which is fantastic. And to me, it's a great disappointment looking in the room that there's not that number of crew who have come in looking for that knowledge. So we're now providing a forum that is available, and the crew are not taking it up. Either that granted, a lot of them are busy and working on the show, but it would be nice. I think the crew that do come in here are the ones who are ready to look at other avenues and look outside the yachting industry. I think it's very easy as a crew member to get this tunnel vision where life doesn't exist outside the crew mess. And
I've come across a similar attitude, so maybe have a comment on that.
It's just a question, really. How do we help the senior crew, the captains, etc., to become a little bit more open to what is available out there?
By not accepting this behavior, because that's what it is. I think none of us as business leaders would accept this kind of behavior from our employees, because that's what we're doing. We're accepting it. I mean, I had a crew party last night. I mean, they were all there, late, drunk. So if they find something interesting, they know where to find it. They will come. But it's up to us as business leaders to make sure that they go where we want them to go. And again, it comes down to top-down management, giving the right example. I'm here. I was late.
I can't remember last night. But we make them go because we send them, we pay for them in the commercial world. Yeah. If it's necessary for them to gain their experience, it's a risk. It's a commercial risk. We train people, all areas. In my previous business, we trained drivers. Drivers that were joined us at a young age driving a van, wanted to to go on to do a heavy goods license. There was a danger that we would train them to drive a bigger truck, they'd go and work for a bigger company. But it was a risk. Of course, we had contracts in place that perhaps we could claw back some of that risk. But we had to carry that risk to a certain to progress.
So I think it's really the question is, why isn't that attitude being adopting?
We did that because we wanted to make our life easier in the business, and I'm sure that most yacht owners, management companies, and captains want to do the same. And that's just a tiny part, but it is a part.
Yeah.
I'll get back to you on something. It's not completely true, because we know I know about some chief stewardesses on board who have the whole program, and they're sending each member of the team. So I don't think it's like that every yacht. We must be careful that we're not going to say that, like, well, I'm Dutch, so how I'm going to say this nicely. That this industry is not very mature, that's not true. But I think there's a lot to be improved. And I think there's a big role for the management companies as well, not only for the captain, but for the management company. In the end, they are paying the captain, sometimes the owner's paying the captain, but there's a role there as well to make sure that that team is in place.
Excuse me, yeah, thank you. I agree with what you guys are saying, but I think it's maybe through charter management or through yacht management that I don't even know if our owners or captains are mostly even aware that coaches or other support teams are out here, and not viewing us all as experts, but someone having a different perspective that you can't see for yourself. And so what about through charter management or yacht management, that it is offered to the owners in their packages, so that that they say, well, if you want, the owners only care about their bottom line, just like many business owners do. And if this is part of their bottom line, whether it's crew turnover or charter turnover, repeat guests, things like that, I just think it should be part of the marketing package.
I'm so glad that you said that, and I promise I didn't. I just wanted to say a few words myself, if I can, in that we at Camper Nicholsons saw that there was a problem with crew welfare, crew turnover, ultimately affecting our bottom line in charter management, because the real value of a charter yacht is the crew, if we're honest. I mean, the yacht can be beautiful, but after a few years it really boils down to the experience on board. And so that's when we enlisted the help of the crew coach to work in partnership with us. And we provide online tutorials. We have a hotline that the crew can call, because it's not uncommon for us to have calls from captains at their wits' end and they don't know who to turn to when we have infighting on board and that kind of thing. So we now have a confidential hotline, which I'm sure Alison's been very busy. I don't know, she can't talk about it. It's confidential.
Some good stories, I'm sure.
And those kind of seminars, it's been great, but I am surprised that in 2 years, it's 2 years that we've been running it, and that more companies haven't adopted that kind of similar program.
I was going to mention something similar, because it's top down and bottom up. Because first of all, the training from a commercial point of view we did for selfish reasons, purely commercial, bottom line. And I'm sure there are advantages of that, particularly with staff retention, which is the reason we did it, not only to improve our business, but also to ensure that the staff we had grew with our business and had the necessary abilities to be able to do that, and that we could retain them, because turnover is very, very expensive in the commercial world. In the yachting world, it's equally expensive, but it's also can alter the dynamics of the vessel, particularly on a charter one, where a particular crew is critical to the charter experience, or the harmony of that crew is. So you can do that for good commercial reasons from the top down, or individuals, of course, can do that. But I think you equally have to be aware when recruiting at any level that somebody comes along who's been on every single course that there is, and that just gathering pieces of paper, it still comes down to the individual, their personality, and that their abilities as an individual physically, as opposed to what it necessarily says on a piece of paper.
I think also attitude is probably their attitude.
Absolutely. And very different dynamics in the hospitality business, and at the end of the day, that is what we indeed are in.
And I think that's a problem at the moment, is there is that, we have all these facilities in place, but now the biggest hurdle facing us is breaking down that fear factor. People do not want to do something they don't understand. As soon as they've done it and they understand it, they think, why didn't I do this sooner?
Sorry.
Good morning, Chloe from Evanston Crew Recruitment. And Evanston Crew Recruitment is part of Evanston's Yacht Management, and we've undertaken with Karen to actually do some leadership, not only within the company with the yacht management section and the crew recruitment, but also with crew on board of our managed yachts. And it's a long-term project, and we hope that it will be successful and that it will mean that the crew dynamics on board are really well monitored, and it will benefit everybody, both us as management company, the owner, and the crew themselves.
And is this because there was a demand from the Edmiston fleet for that service, or it was something that you saw would be required, or you saw it happening in the wider industry?
It's a little bit of both, but essentially it's been powered by Edmiston, by the yacht management team.
Okay.
And there's a lot of convincing that has to be done within the fleet, and obviously the owners, to agree to actually have that happen on board.
I'm curious, what do your owners think when you...
There's change, isn't it, what you're saying? Fear of change.
On my side, on the crew recruitment side, I'm actually not involved with that direct contact with the yachts, so I'd actually have to get our yacht manager, the director, to let you know.
I think another problem is we're such a new industry relative to other industries, and when management companies first started out, there was a huge resistance because a good portion of what management companies did, or the perception certainly, was that they're there to justify their own existence, which is given a lot more paperwork. Now I think it's great that these management companies are showing these initiatives and getting involved in the other developments of social life on board.
In a supporting role, yeah. Okay. No, I was wondering if you had any
management.
Yes, if there were any, what the take-up had been. What was have you found any, how's the attitude been towards you bringing this into play?
All I can say is a mixed attitude. A mixed attitude that's linked to
very often to the size of the yacht or to the captains on board and how they actually perceive that as well. Because there can be a bit of resistance. And then that's
elaborate why you think that is.
No, not the
One quick question with that leadership program, is that something that where does that take place? Is it onshore that you come to, or is it over the on board? So somebody from your team comes on board to.
We actually have the external consultant who's coming on board. So, but we're also doing it at the same time within our team, within the company. So.
Because we have to, I think it's very interesting. You said it yourself. I mean, you can hire an external consultant, and I know Karen can, and I know Elvis and they're brilliant, so don't get me wrong. But the management company, within the company, it has to happen as well, because there again, that's what it started. It's the most difficult thing to do. It's a call to change, and I have seen the industry maturing over the last 5 years. I'm very happy with the direction we're going, but it's a massive call to change. And Charlotte just videoed this. I think we should do this in 5 years again and see where we are then, because I think it's going to be so different than now.
You asked the question, what's the attitude of the captains, etc. What's the take-up? What tends to happen is when they've had some exposure, as I think somebody commented, they go, I should have done this several years ago, it would have made my life so much easier. Once when they've had an element of exposure, then there's a great deal more willingness to take up. Where they've had none of that exposure, they perhaps haven't heard any feedback from other captains, there can be still quite a lot of resistance.
And that's not just in the yachting world, that's everywhere. I mean, people fear what they don't know. They have put a wall up. they're busy. I mean, how many times if somebody came to me and said they need 2 days, I'm like, well, how about 2016? And not because I'm that busy, but there's so much stuff to do, trying to plan that out and to dedicate a block of time. Although once you go through it, you realize how beneficial it is, and you want it on a reoccurring schedule. So it's all about getting that foot in the door, and even if it's just an hour at first as opposed to a day, then you can get that foot in the door and then take it from there. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it is about just changing people's perceptions, and worldwide, if I can be so grandiose, perceptions towards this kind of professional development tools are changing. We have international mega business leaders who are investing in all these programs and have been for 10 years. People like Richard Branson, all the big multi-billionaires, they wouldn't dream of not having a personal coach themselves to get to where they want to go. And I think the parallel is, if we look to the sporting world, would we expect our top athletes, our gold medalists, to get to where they are without having a coach? We're like, well, obviously they have a coach, right? So we just need to bring that same kind of thinking to yachting, that leadership training, leadership coaching, it's not about saying, hey, you guys suck at this, and I'm going to tell you everything you're doing wrong. It's about saying, hey, you could be even more awesome at this. And when you are, you're going to enjoy your job so much better. And when you enjoy your job so much better, you'll enjoy your life so much better. The people that you work with are going to enjoy working with you more. And when you have a team who are inspired, who are motivated, who are passionate and enthusiastic, the guests come on board and they feel the buzz. And then the guests rave about the boat. And then the owners are happy because they've got raving guests. And then they get repeat charter bookings, so the management company is happy. It's like there is a massive business case for this. It's not just about let's all be happy, clappy, and hold hands and hug, right? So I'm so excited to hear all you guys talking about this, because it's huge, and the industry is really only just starting to grow up in this way.
Yeah, but that's what I wanted to mention. I'm
Clearly not passionate about this.
No, I'm ready to go. I mean, Alison, you're higher than me as well. But we must face the reality as well. What Alison is telling, and what Kyron is telling, and what Ebbens are doing, for me, it's old-fashioned. It's like 20 years ago.
Yeah, in the real world.
In the real world, we're way beyond this point. In the real world, we're now looking at customer concepts, at customer experience and customer life cycle management, because everybody's in place and doing their job. In the real world, we're looking at new ways to sell real estate through virtual reality, instead of doing a big show in Monaco where you pay a fortune and nobody comes on board. That's the real world.
So, Ian.
Oh, sorry, Ian.
Alison, you're absolutely right. Among my other interests, I actually have a motorsport company, and we have a permanent coach. The guys that we employ, who drive professionally, have coaches. Now, they were taken on because they were good. The coaches are there to make them better. Now, there's a commercial reason for doing all that, but they have coaches, and these guys are good. And I suspect that everyone in all their sporting fields do the same. And there is so much to be learnt in the commercial and wider world from what sportsmen do. There are very, very few. There are people who have natural ability, but to win world championships, gold medals, etc., without exception, they will not do so on natural ability alone. And the same applies within the commercial world. There are a lot of very good people there. Practice makes perfect. Actually, perfect practice makes perfect.
So what do you think we can do to start adopting, if we're 20 years behind in the yachting industry, what do we need to do now to catch up?
Open up first of all.
Yeah.
Be innovative. And the yachting industry is extremely innovative in building super yachts. like Superyacht, the new technology is amazing. So they're very innovative in that part. If you're looking at charter sales, charter management, crew management, crew placement, it's working, but I see movement online. I see that people are trying to incorporate new techniques, but still it's a very one-on-one business. It's still the Superyacht industry is an extreme networking business. Like as Ian said, if you trust me, I'll deliver to you. But if I am a so-called expert, and if I'm a bit clever, I could say I want to be a coach as well. Say that I decided today. If I do well through my network and I tell everybody that I'm an expert and I'm a coach, within a year people will believe me until they experience that I'm useless at it, and then they'll change to someone else, because that's how it works in Superyacht industry. You try someone until they fail, and then you go somewhere else. And then we come back to compliance, we come back to solvability, we come back to being to get the facts secured and to be innovative in the execution. I think that's basically what I would say about it. What would you say?
Well, I think that it all starts with the crew that are existing on the super yachts today, because they will be the future captains. And so starting to change the culture there, all while the captains that are trying to train and give this avenue and an outlet for the captains is all very well and good, and some are receptive, I'm sure, some are not so, but never quit trying with them. But the crew that you see on the super yachts today are the captains of tomorrow, and so that will change the cultural shift, because in 5 years from now, if you've got a hold of them today, then they're much more willing to adapt and to accept the programs that are put in place. It's not a fear factor anymore.
I think the difference is the crew that are attracted to the industry now compared to the crew that were attracted to the industry 10 years ago is a very different person. It used to be that you had people who loved going sailing on their holidays. They were very much boating people, and they got into it because they loved what they do. Now there's a different motivation, I feel.
What is that motivation? Just
well, probably travel and cash.
Yeah. I mean, if you had to guess,
it's quite a good motivation, actually. I was going to say it's obviously critical to train the people that are coming up for the future, because that's obviously what you do in the commercial world. You can't have a top management team without having the training below that, because when those management team move on, retire, I'd like to think there are people, and always have in my business, that actually want my job and are training to do that for the future. But I equally agree that perhaps not everybody in the commercial world is necessarily suited to that. Not everybody joined the business to actually have that role. People who are very, very good at their individual roles, perhaps simply that is what they're good at. They're not going to make CEOs, they're not going to make captains. I think the overall thing that makes it difficult for us all is just the human factor that we all hate change. And it's until we sort of overcome that, and perhaps in this industry we're even more frightened of change, because changes that have taken place in the past have not always been for the good.
So, what are the takeaways that you'd like everyone to take from your perspectives on the yacht industry and its future?
My takeaways are build small teams. That was one I still strongly believe in. I believe as well that a captain should have a personal assistant. And I don't care how you call it. I see a lot of persons are getting hired. I believe they're going to take that role. I think that's one of the developments in the super, and I applaud that. I think that's very important. And I think one of the takeaways is that we need to be more open-minded, because especially because there a lot of captains are old school captains, and a lot of the associations are run by old school captains. So we have to wait until that new generation Charles is talking about steps up, and then we'll be communicating on board not through walkie-talkies but through Twitter, I think, right?
Yeah, Charles, you mentioned flexibility and also the values thing.
Yes, I think those are very important, but even to back up just a step, it's been very educational just being on the ground here in Monaco for the first time the last few days, and to be here today to certainly gain a different perspective and to be enlightened from kind of the inner workings of the super yacht, and bringing it, I guess, a perspective from the corporate world, because it's very helpful to learn more about that, especially as we're trying to create the other side with the marina down in Christophe Harbour. And everyone has a customer. It doesn't matter if you're the CEO or you're the lowest man on the totem pole. You have a customer, and you need to be well versed in what your customer wants and what your customer anticipate your customer's needs. And I think that's what it really, a lot of this comes down to. And then from that, you can go down to certainly the values and the flexibility in the individual. But understanding your customer, their needs, etc., I think is probably one of the more important things that you can do.
I think it's actually quite encouraging for some of the remarks that have been made from the room that there are things actually being done, and I think the training side of things and the coaching is fantastic that that is actually being done. And to use a shipping analogy, it is a little bit like an oil tanker. It takes a long time to turn around, but as long as it's turning, then I'm quite encouraged by what we've heard. And there are experts out there. There are experts in this room and on the floor. And hopefully the industry will recognise those that are genuinely experts, and they will use them for the purpose that is really beneficial, the same way as the commercial world does. And perhaps over time just learn and look at what the commercial world is actually doing and the things that can be adopted, because it will make it a much better industry. Part of that future as well, of course, is not only current owners, but the challenge that there is of attracting new owners to the industry. And many of those new owners today, or potential owners, perhaps are very different to the owners that had vessels in the past. And they may well be looking for more transparency of the commercial side of what they're looking for. It is a leisure experience, and I think sometimes there is a thought that once people get into the area of a hobby and fun, that they don't care very much. And maybe initially they don't, but at some point there will be days when they think, what the hell am I doing? And we don't want that to happen. We want them to come into the industry and to stay, because they are the future of everybody in this room.
Keeping it fun, yeah.
I think taking away from this, I mean, in many ways, sitting up here, you're preaching to the converted. Everybody who is sitting in the panel, or sitting in the audience, understands what we're talking about and believes in it. So now, I think every one of us has a responsibility to go away from here and talk about it to somebody else who isn't sitting in the room. And it probably will fall on deaf ears for the most part. But even if one other person starts talking about it, then we're starting change and continuing that change.
Thanks. Does anyone have any questions?
Deep words, man.
No? Oh, sorry. Didn't see you over there.
Well, I'm not from industry. I'm a journalist from Spain, from Palma de Mallorca, and I want to ask you how the communication is the level important for all the captains inside your company, because for me the yacht is as an enterprise, it's a company, and also inside your company and outside your company. I think you understand me.
Anyone?
I don't know. I mean, communication is obviously vital in anything you do, but on a yacht, certainly one of the things that I enjoyed when I was yachting was that the different dynamic, and you've got that captain-crew relationship, and the very next conversation you're having is with the owner or with a high net worth individual, and I think managing they're two very different relationships that you have, and managing that communication, that's a learning process. That's something that just takes time.
I think actually you even have a course on that communication. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely, and because it, as I said before, it all comes down to relationships. It all comes down to being able to communicate with people effectively in a way that they hear you and understand where you're coming from. You mentioned fun, and I just want to touch on that because that's something that obviously I am super passionate about. But I'm talking about serious fun. I'm talking about fun on purpose. And actually designing fun, because we're in the business of fun. People don't buy super yachts and charter super yachts because they think it's going to be a pain in the neck. They think it's going to be fun and it's going to be the best thing ever. In fact, it is like absolutely the best thing that you could possibly, aspire to having the best fun that you could have. So we actually have to take that on board and as a business to embrace the fact it is about fun. And when we help that our leaders, and help our crew to actually have fun, the guests have fun. So we're not talking about fun as a frivolous thing. We're talking about fun as almost being the point of what we do. And that's really what I think I'd like to kind of impart, that's what I'm the most passionate about.
Yeah, I think we can see that, definitely.
I think that's where, we talk about running a yacht as a small business or a multi-million, euro turnover. Fun is essentially our profit.
Yeah.
That is the product we're selling, and that's the profit in which we measure how good we are doing our job.
I think you don't understand me of my question, because I don't talking about fun. I'm talking about relationship with the countries. You are a company that you travel and you visit a lot of countries, and you visit a lot of cities. There are crises for an accident or whatever, and you have to be not fun. You have to be really serious to communicate what's happening or the media. This is what I'm talking about.
I understand what you're talking about in that situation, crisis management, I suppose, and perhaps I can just relay the situation we have in our motorsport company, because obviously accidents do happen, and we have a policy, very strict policy, and I'm sure whether or not I can't speak for the people on the yachting side, we do obviously in our business as well. For example, if we had, if we're in the food industry, if we had a product recall, what action would we take? Why was there a product recall? And how do we have that relationship with the press, for example, to manage that situation? And we have that in place. Whether or not I suspect that the management companies
I think the
would
yachts
also
would
have
their
that.
shore support, the DPA that would normally have a system in place to deal with communication to press or outside parties on any kind of incident. Well, thank you all very much for your thoughts and insight into our wonderful industry. Thank you everyone for coming here, and thank you ACREW for organising.